Hi, and welcome back to the channel. Can you afford to retire in Bulgaria and live only on your Social Security? That's a question that has to be answered by folks in the US who are retired, and that is their only source of income. Many folks in America think that they cannot come to Bulgaria and live comfortably on their Social Security, and that's probably due to a lot of rising reports about inflation and prices going up here. And you'll see these things that say, Bulgaria is not the bargain it once was. And that's very true. But have they increased enough to make Bulgaria off limits for many retired Americans? Today, we're going to take a look at some practical numbers so that you can assess whether or not Bulgaria is a good financial fit for your income. Hi, my name is Maureen. In 2024, I moved to Bulgaria with my husband, Jeremy, and our two tuxedo cats, Damon and Pythias, and I make videos for expats and wannabe expats to give you enough information so that you can make your own informed decisions. Vanguard recently published a report that said something like 58% of Americans cannot afford to maintain their standard of living on their retirement income. There's been some rebuttal against that about the way that they estimated their numbers. I'm not here to refute or support that report. I'm not an economist. But the bottom line is, whether that number is accurate or not, there are a fair number of retirees or about to be retirees in the United States who are looking at living primarily off their Social Security income. And if you stay in the United States, that is very difficult to do. Now, I can't begin to talk numbers because there's so many variables. I don't know what your Social Security amount is. I don't know what your expenses are. I don't know if you're single or part of a married couple with two Social Security incomes, which, by the way, makes it a lot easier. I don't know your investments, your assets, or any of that stuff. I can only talk kind of generally and give you a sense of what the cost of living is here, and you can assess whether or not that's something you can afford based on your current income. Before we get into Bulgaria specifically, there are things that Americans, creative Americans, do when they're facing retirement and they just don't have enough to make ends meet. Some people are doing side hustles. They are converting to part-time work. They are downsizing a home. They're living with family, or maybe they're selling their home and renting something smaller. Those are all possibilities. But what if those don't work for you, or you've already done them and it's still not sufficient for you to pay your bills on a monthly basis? I want to talk to those of you who have exhausted all those options and just really don't know what else to do, because the other option is relocating to a country with a lower cost of living. So can you live on Social Security income alone in Bulgaria? Possibly, yes. That's a very generic answer, and we will look at some numbers here in a few minutes. It really does depend on your monthly benefit amount and your standard of living. Before we get started, a one caveat. You know how I always have to have a caveat. It doesn't do me any good. You guys still make comments about my caveats in the comment section. It's fine. But one caveat is there are probably, I don't know, 8 million videos. That's not a scientific number. I'm just guessing. All about different countries you can retire to and live on Social Security. And you'll see these headlines pop up. Yes, you can live on $1,500 a month in Cuenca, Ecuador. Live on the beach in Panama like a king for $1,000 a month. Thailand for pennies a day. I don't have the expertise to discuss those places. I have lived in 3 other countries in addition to the United States. The first was Mexico, and we were not retired there. We're actually not retired now. We collect Social Security because we are past our full retirement age, but we still work. Social Security is not our only source of income. I lived in Ecuador, where we had one Social Security payment, and that was Jeremy's. I was not collecting. And now we're in Bulgaria, and we are both collecting our Social Security payments. So I'm not an expert in these other places, but I can tell you, probably because I've watched like 4 million of those 8 million videos, that I think those numbers are grossly low. And that makes sense, because if people with a YouTube channel, they're writing a blog and they're making their money off people coming to the country, that they are promoting, then they have an investment in having you come down there. I have no investment whether or not you come to Bulgaria. If you'd like to come, I think it's a wonderful country. If you choose another country, no harm, no foul. I'm good with that too. I think a lot of those information sources eliminate a lot of expenses, some of which we're going to talk about today because you may not have considered them. And I want to make sure you put together an accurate budget for yourself, regardless of where you go in the world, so that you don't get caught with any nasty surprises once you arrive. Having said that, before you can determine if you can afford to live in Bulgaria on your Social Security or live in any country on your Social Security, stop and think about which U.S. expenses you're going to retain. Those don't all get wiped out just because you leave U.S. soil. So here are some things to think about. The Part B of your Medicare payment. In 2026, that number is going up to, I think it's $206 a month. If you are collecting Social Security and you opt for that payment, so Medicare is not totally free. Okay, Part A is free, and you get that when you turn 65. And then Part B, don't ask me what it covers. I have no idea. We have it, but I don't know what it covers. It covers more stuff than Part A. Part A is not enough. Part B, regardless of which insurance plan you choose, has a flat rate. I think right now in 2025, it's $180. It's going up to $206 in 2026. If you get Social Security, they deduct that amount from your benefit. So when they tell you what your benefit is, they're talking about the whole aggregate, including that Medicare Part B. Mentally, I always have to subtract the number of the Part B premium payment when I'm trying to see how much actual income I'm getting from Social Security, because they subtract $206 from my payment and $206 from Jeremy's payment. Now, it's not mandatory for you to pay that Part B. You can opt out of it, but make sure you do your research before you do, because there are substantial financial penalties. If you end up going back to the United States and want to reinstate that payment, there's some percentage of extra monthly payment based on how many years you opted out, and that payment goes up and stays with you for the rest of your life. So it can be a very expensive proposition to eliminate the Medicare Part B and then try to opt back into it later. Jeremy and I have kept our Part B. We have not opted out. So that comes off of our Social Security payments every month. That's one U.S. expense you might want to think about hanging on to. These are other things that a lot of folks don't factor in when they leave the country. Trips back home. How often do you want to go back home, particularly if you have kids and grandkids? I would imagine you're going to want to see them from time to time. Factor that into your budget. Adjusting to a new country is difficult. And sometimes you just want the support of a friendly face. And cutting yourself off from that because you can't afford to fly home is probably not worth the stress. Okay, speaking of kids and grandkids, do you plan to continue giving them gifts on their birthdays and at the holiday time, or helping them out? If those are things that are important to you, factor in a monthly amount for that and add that to your budget when you move overseas. Do you have charities in the U.S. that you want to continue supporting? Do you have the dreaded credit card debt, which I would strongly urge you to take care of in any way that you can think of before you move abroad, so you don't have debt when you start your new living adventure? But do you have it? Leaving the U.S. doesn't mean you can just be forgiven for those payments. You have to continue to pay off that credit card debt until it is paid in full. If you're keeping your U.S. bank account, are there bank fees associated with that bank account? If you're keeping a U.S. property, your home, and maybe renting it out, factor in any costs for that home, including property management fees. What about your income taxes? The U.S. is one of the few countries in the world that will tax you on your income regardless of where you are. Now, many of you don't make enough on Social Security to have that tax, so clearly that's not going to change. But if you have some Roth distributions or other things that are coming in, you can be taxed on a percentage of your Social Security income, and you will have to file a U.S. income tax. Bear in mind the expenses that come with doing that. The other thing that pops into my head, because it's an expense that we retained, are subscription services, your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, things that you will continue to use when you come to your new country. Now, those are not super expensive, but you don't want to just overlook all these little nickel and dime things only to have them add up at the end of the month and you find out that you're caught short. So the first thing you need to do is look at your budget, figure out which expenses are coming with you, which new expenses you might incur once you leave the country, and calculate what that amount is if you have to divide it by 12 to come up with a monthly payment. So that's part of your monthly budget right there. Oh, and another thing that just popped into my head, are you getting a storage unit? If you don't want to sell all your stuff because you want to hedge your bets in case you come back to the US and you want to hang on to it, but you do say sell your house, then you need to get a storage unit to put that stuff in, and that's going to be another US-based monthly fee. So those are all the ones I can kind of think of off the top of my head. You may have more. If you're an expat living abroad and you have other US expenses that I failed to account for, drop a note in the comment. That way we can all benefit from your experience. Now, for purposes of this conversation, I'm going to assume that you have enough of a nest egg to fund getting here. So if you want to take an exploratory trip, if you want to ship some stuff over, you have to figure out the costs for the visas, for the visa agent fees, if you're paying an attorney, some basic household setup. As I've said in other videos, while most rentals here are furnished, they're never going to be 100% furnished the way that you want them. So I would budget some money to get things for your new apartment. I don't know how much to tell you. We bought a good chunk of the stuff for the apartment that we're in now. The folks that rented it out did not have all of the smaller things like pots, pans, cups, plates, small kitchen appliances, bedding, linens. They would have supplied them for us because that's pretty much expected here, but we told them not to because we wanted to get our own stuff and take it with us when we moved. So we spent far more than most people, but I would set aside a couple $1,000s to really make the apartment your own when you arrive here. I'm going to assume that you have the nut saved to actually relocate here. All those expenses, your airfare, all of that stuff. We're assuming that you're just starting fresh once you arrive in Bulgaria. We need to assume a baseline here, or else there'll be so many variables that this video won't be helpful. We're going to assume that you're going to rent a furnished 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. All right. We're not going to assume that you're here to buy a house. Obviously, if you come here, if you sell a house in the US and you've pulled the equity out of your home in the United States and you want to buy something here, then you're living without a monthly rent payment, and then living here on Social Security is a no-brainer. I'm going to assume that you're going to incur a rental payment once you come here, and that is the premise that we're going off. Now, these ranges I'm going to give you, they are ballpark. Every time I do a video that talks about the cost of anything, I get this variety of responses on both ends of the spectrum. Oh my God, you're overpaying. You're paying because they know you're American. Oh, you're underpaying. Well, I can't believe how cheap that is. The bottom line is that clearly comes from the viewer's perspective of what is inexpensive and what isn't. So I'm going to give you the ranges that I have researched. I'm going to give you a high and a low, and I'm going to give you amounts for both a single and a couple. We're going to assume a moderate lifestyle. You're not bare bones. You're not eating rice and beans in the village every day, but you're also not living in, a mansion on the Black Sea. And not that you need my permission. You're free to criticize my numbers in the comments, but be prepared to cite your sources because we don't want to lead people astray. I've done a lot of research based on what Jeremy and I are paying. That's only one couple. It's not scientific. So I've also done a lot of online research and talked to other people as well. Oh, and the other thing we're going to assume for purposes of this discussion is that you're not going to live in Sofia. Sofia is the capital, and it's more expensive than the rest of the country. So if I included that, we'd have one more variable, which makes it difficult to get a real firm grasp on what the numbers are. So if you are planning on Sofia, you should plan on a substantially higher cost for pretty much everything. We are looking at other parts of the country for this video. Okay, let's look at our numbers here for both singles and couples. I'm going to assume that you're renting a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment and that rent will not change based on whether there's one person living there or two. Fortunately, they don't charge by the person. So your rent is going to be the same for that size of apartment. So on the low end, you should expect $350. On the higher end, newer building, that kind of thing, you should expect to be paying on the high end of that range, which would be $650. Monthly utilities, I've listed as electric, heat, cooling, water, and garbage. We don't pay for our garbage. I don't know that anyone does here. I mean, I'm sure the owner pays for it. There are dumpsters on the street, so we do not pay a separate fee, but you may in some places. And I'm trying to compare apples to apples, particularly if it's an expense that you're paying in the US. So I'm estimating 80 to 110 for a single and 100 to 150 for a couple. That is about what we pay for the couple range, and we do have air conditioning in the summer. So that's an average. Home internet and phone is very inexpensive here. You're looking at 25 to 40 for the two of those things as a single, and maybe 30 to 50 as a couple. Transportation is an iffy one. You're going to have to tweak this based on what your needs are. These figures assume that you don't own a car and you use taxis and buses equally. What I didn't factor in here that Jeremy and I do is that we rent a car about once a month for 3 or 4 days to go out and check out the countryside or run errands and do things that are difficult to do when you don't own a car. I didn't include that in transportation. That seems like an extra that a lot of other people might not have. But if you want to budget that in, car rentals here are really inexpensive in the off season. My favorite company is one called, I have two. I have one that's based in Sofia, that's a family owned, that's very good. It's called Vanguard. We are not in Sofia, we are in Plovdiv. So we use Top Rental Car, which is a national rental car company. They have always treated us very well. And I'm a member, so I do all my bookings online and you sign up for an account, and they're constantly giving me discounts. Sometimes I get a car for $20 a day, 20 US dollars a day. In the summer, that does go up. We paid as much as $50 a day when we were in Bansko, but that's full insurance. That's the whole 9 yards. So budget that in if it's something that you think you would want to do. If you can afford it, I would highly recommend it because it really makes exploration around the country a lot of fun. Groceries, as we talked about, have gone up. I did not include alcohol. I didn't include alcohol in the whole budget. If you drink, add some percentage in there for alcohol. As a single, at the low end, you're probably talking $300, high end $500, and as a couple, $450 to $750. And that includes everything for me, not just what we consume or what we eat, but household cleaning, toilet paper, all the things that come from the grocery store. The higher end of those ranges would be, of course, if you're buying imported items. I mean, if you have to have, I don't know, something that has to come from the United States, that's going to cost more. Let's keep going. Entertainment, dining out, again, that's super iffy depending on how much you want to go out. So I took a ballpark. If you're single and you're not going out a whole lot, you're looking at 100 to 250. If you are a couple, you're probably looking at 150 to 300. And of course, it depends on what kind of restaurant and how often you go out. So adjust that up or down based on your best guesstimate of where you think you might fall on that spectrum. Health insurance is going to run you $20 to $45 a month for, it's probably high. Let me think a minute. We just did our health insurance. We are going to the agent's office today. And if you are under 70, so I'm 67, and I know, and Jeremy is over 70. Jeremy is 72. So we had one lower premium and one higher premium. So once you hit 70, the health insurance premiums go up substantially. So I think mine was like, all right, I pulled up our own policy that we just got the quote on yesterday. So as you can see, the quote for me, he did convert it into euros, which makes it a lot easier. It's 89.70 euros a year. This is a year. And Jeremy's is about double that. So if we take 89.70 and add 179.40, that comes to 269 euros. And I'm not really sure what it's a little over $300. So you can figure out, and this is across the board, this is what you would pay for the basic policy. So you can break that down if you're a single and see exactly how much or how little that is going to be. Okay, back to this, but that's a pretty good range from 20 to 45. Yeah, we get it. 20 to 45 and 45 to 85. Actually, now that I think about that, that's actually high. Our health insurance, I think, only came to $26 a month divided by 12. Hang on, I'm tapping on my calculator. Yeah, ours can. I'm going to change this. For the low end, for the two of us, is really only $27. So that means over here it would probably be more like $14 or $15. That's going to affect our numbers down at the bottom, but not so grossly that we have to be terribly concerned. And you can get more extensive policies than that, but that's the basic emergency coverage. The next line item is medical out-of-pocket prescriptions. Again, depends on your needs. We don't do a lot of this, so I didn't really go by what we spend, because the only prescription we get, which is not even a prescription here, is my thyroid medicine, and that is so ridiculously cheap. It comes out to like $2 a month. So we're not a good indicator of that. But I talked to other people, and I think that these ranges are pretty much in the ballpark for what you might be looking at. If you had extensive medical needs, then you want to increase those numbers. Clothing is also a matter of personal preferences. When we came from the US, we bought a lot of clothing ahead of time. Jeremy and I are both very tall, and we have big feet. And that's probably not a problem over here, but remember that we came from Ecuador, where the people are small. So we couldn't buy clothes down there that fit us. So I kind of had that mindset of, oh, whatever I get, I have to bring from the US. So we don't really have an ongoing clothing budget because we brought it all from the US. So adjust this up or down depending on your own needs. Then I threw in a personal thing for like haircuts, manicures, massages, anything that you do for yourself personally. And then I always throw in some miscellaneous because you just never know. I'm sure that something has not been accounted for here. And what that came down to for an overall total for a single person was somewhere between $1,280. These are US dollars to $2,200. So it's about there's about $1,000 range there, which I know is a lot, but I didn't want to get into the mindset of those videos that say, oh, it's so cheap and you can live on your Social Security. I don't know if you can. I don't know how much your benefit is, and I don't know what your style of living is. But I think that you're safe within these two ranges. And then for a couple, it came out to be about $1,800 to $3,000. I can tell you that we do live comfortably on Jeremy's Social Security income alone. We do not need to tap into my Social Security for our Bulgarian living expenses. Now, bear in mind, you need to go back and add in those US-based expenses that we talked about at the beginning of the video. This is just what you will spend in Bulgaria. And then I made a couple of notes here that don't forget to add pet expenses in if you're bringing pets with you. Generally, we have found veterinary prices in Bulgaria substantially less expensive, and the quality of care here is excellent. Damon had a urinary blockage a month or two ago, and there were catheters involved and sedating the cat and medications and antibiotics, and we had 4 vet visits, and it was under $200. So, but still you want to budget. And I think cat food, I'd have to do a separate video on what we're spending on the cats, but cat food would also probably be less than what you're paying in the United States. And then throw in expenses for hobbies that aren't accounted for here. So Jeremy's a photographer. He's constantly, I don't know what he's buying, some photography equipment. If you're a sewer, if you're into biking, if you're going to take those hobbies with you, think about the ongoing costs that are associated with those hobbies. So can you live on Social Security in Bulgaria? Sure. I did some research and found that the median monthly Social Security benefit is $1,970 a month. Now that's the median. If you took Social Security at 62, then probably yours wouldn't be that high. Also remember that that amount does not include the monthly Medicare Part B premium. You're really looking at more like high 1700s a month as the median. But as you can see, it fits into that $1,200 to $2,200 range. And if you are a couple and have two Social Security incomes, then you would certainly make it in that range that we estimated for a couple. So can you live on Social Security here? Technically, yes. And we do. Just remember, you'll have a bit more wiggle room if you're in the middle to higher end of the spectrum on your monthly income amount. Or you are a couple with two benefits. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, yes, if your monthly Social Security check is $1,000, you can come to Bulgaria. Only if you have some other investments or a pension or something else that's giving you a monthly income. If you want to come here, you want to make sure you have enough to live comfortably. If you come here and have to sit in your house all day long, that's not really going to be an adventure. That's going to be depressing. So the bottom line summary is, yes, you can absolutely live here if your only income is going to be Social Security. But like everything else, it depends on your lifestyle and what you're expecting from your retirement. And one more time, I know I've already said this a couple of times, be very careful about comparing these numbers to the live on Mexico on $1,500 a month. I don't think those are accurate. I generally inflate those numbers by at least 50%. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up so that YouTube doesn't think I'm a total waste of bandwidth. If you want more information about living in Bulgaria and what those costs are, then please stick around, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. I do try to post once a week. And if you want to know what our costs were to actually move to Bulgaria, I have another video on that. I'll post a link to it here so you can check that out as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.